Well, hey everybody, welcome back to this month's Leaders Village webinar. Really excited to dive into a subject that in our local community and among our leadership we found profoundly helpful in leadership development and in faith development of our people. And so I want to introduce our guest and sort of co-host for this conversation, a good friend of mine, our family ministry pastor here at Southridge named Carrie Jones. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
First webinar. Carrie does some of our podcasts. If you listen to our Leaders Village Finding Our Way podcast, we swap off from time to time. But great to have you in this setting.
Thank you.
We're just spoiler alert, we're not talking about family ministry. That
No.
might be another conversation for another day. But today we're going to have a different conversation. Before we do, though, I just want to kind of dive in for viewers to get to know you a little bit better. Sort of introduce yourself, give us a bit of the background on your family and personal life, whatever.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me. So my name's Carrie, as Jeff mentioned. I have been on staff here at Southridge, or at Southridge Community Church it'll be 5 years in August. A little bit about my personal life. I'm married to Steve. We've been married. It'll be 25 years in May. Wow. 25 years. And we have 3 daughters. 2 of them are grown and like in their early 20s, and our youngest is in grade 9 in high school. Yeah,
All right.
It's a little bit about our world. Oh, and we have a dog. We have a puppy as well. Well, not a puppy, 2-year-old dog.
Do the dog time. Every conversation needs some dog time.
A little bit. So we were one of these families that during the pandemic, we welcomed a pup into our family, a 2-year-old pup, Teddy. And so we are, family of 3 girls and 1 dog, and it's been mostly good. It's been good. It's been good.
Just to be clear.
Yes.
We're here today actually drilling into a passion area of yours that originally I think was just a personal passion for you, and then it became kind of a conversation among some friends and some keeners and whatnot. And then you eventually got some training and certification in this thing called the Enneagram. Just give us a bit of the sort of personal journey and what got you to like become a certified Enneagram, I don't know, consultant, trainer, what do you call yourself? Facilitator.
Sure. It was probably about 10 years ago. It was right around the time I was coming up on turning 40. So I was kind of at that real, interesting season of life. And I was out for a walk with a good friend of mine. Her name's Laura. She was actually in the process of becoming a certified spiritual director. And one of the things they studied in her training was the Enneagram. So she was telling me about the Enneagram. We were up for this early morning walk. It was like dark and foggy before the kids got up for school. And she's telling me about it. And to be honest, I was super skeptical and pretty resistant at the time. It just seemed a little bit too out there for me. I was like, I don't know, this feels a bit weird and I don't know if I should trust this and I'm not sure. But I was interested in asking questions and curious. And then probably over the next 9 months to a year, I just kept bumping up against the Enneagram. I would kind of come across it in podcasts or in books I was reading or in conversations or in blog, different ways that I just was seeing it everywhere, and I began to kind of look at it as a bit of an opportunity to explore deeper, almost like an invitation. Funny fact, a friend of my mom's a few years prior to that, who she herself was a spiritual care provider in a hospital setting, she had downsized and given me all of these books. And most of them I put in my basement in boxes. And I remembered that, there were all those Enneagram books in there. And so I went down to my basement and found like literally tons of books, mostly from the 70s and 80s, that were all Enneagram, like core reading.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I kind of had this library at my disposal, and I just dug in super, super deep. It was kind of a bit of an inner journey. Didn't talk about it with a lot of people because at that point, not many people knew about the Enneagram. And I was just in a season of life where I was ready to do some inner work and kind of face my own shadows. And we'll get into that in this conversation. But I dove in deep and came up for air a few months later.
And the reason I want to talk about this today is because, as you'd said, like it's pretty popular in faith circles, but there's also some resistance because of its popularity in faith circles. You kind of bump into people who are like into it or decidedly not into it. And in our context, we've experienced a bit of both,
Sure.
but found that as we've been able to kind of galvanize people and leaders and teams, it's been a very helpful, not just leadership development tool, but a personal growth tool in people's followership and faith. And so I'm curious, first of all, just in your own experience as you're describing it, like what was it about the Enneagram uniquely that gripped you? We've had other personal awareness, kind of self-assessment tools that we've used with leaders and teams before. We probably use about 6 of them. But this one has kind of captured our team and our culture differently. For you, what was it about the Enneagram that really you started tracking with?
Yeah, I love that question. I mean, first of all, I will say I've always loved self-assessment tools in general, whether it's Myers-Briggs, SDI, StrengthsFinder, all the things. Always self-awareness and just personal growth is a huge value of mine. So I've always loved that kind of stuff. I think the Enneagram, and I will say this, like the Enneagram isn't for everyone. It's a great tool, but it's one of many tools. So some people really track with it. I think here in our context, we've really kind of, like you said, grabbed onto it and it's been really valuable. But, you know, some people are like, it's not for me, and that's totally fine. For me, I think what I really loved about it is that it's so focused on growth, right? So it's so focused on understanding your type, but that's the beginning. And then once you understand your type, it's about understanding like, okay, how, because it's really about these 9 personality types. And then it's about, okay, why did I create that personality type? And so then it dives into your own journey, and it just creates so much empathy, because every type, and again, we'll get into this, every personality type is centered around some kind of a loss that they experienced as a young child. And so that we create these personality types to essentially compensate for that loss, and they help us survive in our lives in a really great way. But knowing that just gives so much empathy for ourselves and for each other. And I think I love the empathy part. And then I also loved that, okay, now that I know my type, how do I grow? How do I become healthy? How does knowing my type and that awareness help me to relate to others in healthier ways? So that's why I loved it.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you mentioned the other kind of self-awareness tools that we've used, most of them are about kind of plotting and defining. One of the uniquenesses of the Enneagram that I think has gripped us is that it kind of defines for you a starting point to grow out of.
Yeah, that's right.
And it almost presumes that you're trying to grow out of something, and even the humility of mutually entering into conversations that are kind of starting with the place you're trying to get out of or almost escape from is a totally different mindset compared to, you know, StrengthsFinder or something that is in that sense more positive or more affirming. Right. Not that the Enneagram is unilaterally negative, but I think around here we found that to be quite compelling. I guess final question would be for you, like why has it become so significant? You originally tracked with the empathy and the kind of the growth mindset. Now, I mean, you've gone and gotten certified. Yep. Like, what is it about it now that is just has you sold?
Has me sold. I think for me, it's because I have experienced personally, and in my core, like key relationships, just so much growth. And it's just been a really helpful tool to understand myself, to understand others. The other thing about the Enneagram that is so unique, and it's a little bit counterintuitive, it's a tool that once you understand your type and once you understand, like, you know, maybe the dark side or the shadow side of your type, it's not about trying harder. It's actually about awareness. And like once you understand, okay, here's why I spiral into that place, the awareness alone is what helps you grow. And so, I don't know, there's just something about it that I've just really, it's just so unique, so different than anything else I've experienced. It's also really, for me and for many others, connected to like a contemplative spiritual path.
Yeah.
And so that's also part of the growth and transformation. And I love it too because it's not for the faint of heart. Like it's hard stuff. And, you know, some people say, oh, that's so fun. You're an Enneagram facilitator. I'm like, yeah, like I don't think you'd wish this on anyone. It's not that fun.
You've never gone to one of these sessions before.
No, exactly. And even I remember, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, but once I started reading all these books about the Enneagram, and once I discovered my type, it was not fun. It was like a reckoning, because you're like, oh my gosh, this is how I operate in the world, and this is the impact I have on people, and this is how I'm motivated, and I want to like figure this out so I can grow. So I think I love the depth, the messiness of it, how it transforms relationships, how it helps me become more of my true self, and what that means for the church.
Fantastic. So we want to provide some awareness for all of you who are taking this in order to be able to access some of these resources for not only yourself, but your own teams and church contexts, your ministry environments. And so just by way of kind of introduction, there are a few sort of basic terms. You talk about these 9 personality types or whatever, but they're given numbers. So when we talk about your Enneagram number, first of all, what do we mean when we say, like, what's your number?
Right. Okay. So let me just back up a bit. So there's a map. There's an Enneagram map with 9 types. And within the 9 types, there's 3 triads. Okay. So and we'll get into that a little bit as well. Because there's some language that goes along with the Enneagram that you almost need to understand to decode some of this, right? So there's these 9 types. Really, as you back up before that, there's 3 triads. I guess what I want to say about the 9 types is that all 9 types are connected. So sometimes, like when you find out your type, when you find out your number, you're like, oh, that's who I am. But actually, we have all 9 types within us. Just one is going to be like our home base, kind of like your default position, your favorite, where you always land. And all 9 types are equal in value. It's not like one is better or worse than the other. They're all equal in value. They're really essentially 9 ways of being in the world, or 9 personalities that we develop in order to survive in the world. What was your next question?
Well, while you're talking about the types,
sure.
Talk about the relationship between the types, or even the numbers specifically, and the triads. Like among the 9, there are really 3 groups of 3.
Yeah,
right?
let's back up. Right. So there's the 3 triads. So there's the body triad, the heart triad, and the mind triad. The body triad is type 8, 9, and 1. The heart triad is type 2, 3, and 4, and the mind triad is 5, 6, and 7. And essentially, all you need to know about the triads is these are the ways that those types, so for example, I live in the body triad, so the 8, 9, and the 1. That means that we process information and make decisions based on like our somatic body. So that means that we, in that triad, we often have like a gut sense, or like an intuition, or like a spidey sense of knowing what's real. If you live in the heart triad, then you're motivated by and you process information through your feelings. And so these are people that are really, really in touch with their emotions. And then in the mind triad, as you can imagine, these types 5, 6, and 7, they process information like intellectually, rationally. They think things through, and that's what motivates them. That's how they process information. That's how they respond to life. And the Enneagram, I mean, we'll get into it, and we only have an hour. There's so many ways we could go. But the other thing that's really important to say about the triads is that each triad has a very unique journey. And what I mean by that is the struggle for those of us in the body triad is we struggle with power and control. And our journey in life is really about letting go of power and control. In the heart triad, that group struggles with the need for affirmation and approval and esteem. And their journey in life is about releasing that, not needing that. And then those in the mind triad, they struggle with a need for security, certainty, and their journey in life is about letting go of that. So that's a bit of the framework. And then within those triads are the 9 types. The other thing to mention is that once you land on your type, and we're going to walk through the 9 types, each type also has a wing. Well, they actually have 2 wings.
Yes, the wing is
the wing.
Other. So there's triad, type, or number, and then the wing.
Right.
What's the wing? Because this gets confusing fast.
Yeah, the wing is essentially, you have 2 wings. The wings are the number on either side of your number. So if you're a 6, then you have a 5 and a 7 wing. Typically, one is more dominant than the other. I've never met anybody who would say I'm I'm so steady and balanced that I have both wings.
Yeah.
You know, usually you veer towards one or the other. I have heard a theory that some people say for the first half of your life, you have one wing, and the second half of your life, you lean toward the other.
Wow.
And
in Enneagram vernacular for keeners, they'll refer to themselves as number, W number.
That's right.
And then the second number is obviously one variable from the first number, right?
Yep.
And that's short form for my number and the wing that am, right?
Good. I didn't know you knew that. There you go. Okay.
One W2. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And so how do you determine your wing? Like, is that a whole nother adventure?
That's a whole other adventure. Yeah, I would say let's start by understanding your type, because once you understand your type, then you're going to lean in. Then your next step is really like, okay, what's my wing? Because it does take you quite a while typically to land on your type. That's not like an instant journey. It's a bit of a process for most people. But the interesting thing about once you know your wing, you know, a 3 with a 4 wing does look very different than a 3 with a 2 wing.
Yeah.
Because you're essentially leaning into and borrowing the qualities of the other number.
Yeah.
So
as we walk through, we're going to provide some awareness during this webinar to just walk through the basics of each of the 9 types.
Right.
And as you work through any one of the 9, what are some of the main kind of pieces you're going to walk us through? This will be somewhat repetitive, but unique to each number.
Yeah, this will be like a real brief overview of the 9 types. And we'll talk about at the end, you know, some resources if you want to go deeper, if you want to find out some next steps. But essentially, we'll talk about each number, you know, what they're like in the world, what they're like at their best, what they're like at their worst, you know, kind of like how they view the world based on the loss that they've experienced, and then some of the ways they grow. Okay. So we'll just touch on each of those. There was something I was going to say. Anyways, I'll come back to me.
We'll come back to that. Anyways, this is already not shallow stuff. So even though we're kind of glossing over as you're taking this in, you want to kind of filter through, hey, which of these descriptions really resonates with me in order to maybe start the journey of identifying with a type. So what's interesting too is when people walk through the 9 types, they never start with number 1, do they? They never go from 1 to 9.
No, you start with 8.
You start with 8.
Yes.
Again, this is all.
I know.
This is all the voodoo of Enneagram, inner Enneagram speak. Why is that?
Because you want to start with a triad. So for whatever reason, Enneagram teachers, Enneagram wisdom, we always start with the body triad. We do 8, 9, 1.
Okay.
And then we go 2, 3, 4. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Every number, you know, like I said, every number is equal in value. So it's not like 3 is better than 4. They all have their strengths and their challenges. And the thing about the Enneagram is, I like how Ian Cron, he's an Enneagram teacher and author, he says, it's really about the best parts of you also being the worst parts of you. And that's why the Enneagram is not for the faint of heart, because you have to be ready to look at like, what are the hard parts about me that maybe I'm not ready to face yet. So it's really about the best parts of you also being the worst parts of you. The other thing I'll mention is that usually the number that you are the most uncomfortable with, the number that you have the most resistance toward, not always, but usually that's your type. The one that makes you feel a little bit like seen or exposed.
Most embarrassed.
Yeah. So, you know, we'll talk a little bit later here about discerning your type, and there's great assessments out there and such. But often when you hear the description and one that just makes you feel really uncomfortable, that's often your type. So pay attention to that.
Now, I'll just make the disclaimer that usually this kind of process is like a full day or a weekend workshop level. So we are hydroplaning over these types.
That's
so
right.
Just make some quick notes and we'll try to move on. So start with the number 8 and walk us through the basics of that first type.
Sure. So type A is known as the challenger. Richard Rohr, who's an Enneagram teacher, and some of you may know, Richard Rohr would say this is the person who has a need to be against. And this is the person, you know, when they walk in the room, you feel their presence. They are a leader, they're a challenger, they're decisive, they're intense. You know, some of the words that I would have written down would be they're determined, they fight for the underdog, they're passionate, they're truthful, they're brave. And the thing about them is, again, every type has experienced some kind of a loss in their early holding environment in their childhood. And usually, often, it's a perceived loss. And so what happens is, we're born with a certain template. Well, let me just back up. The basis of the Enneagram is that each of us is born with an essential nature, a true self. And that true self is the part of us that brings a beautiful gift into the world, a gift that nobody else can bring into the world. And then we experience some kind of a loss, usually, typically, unintentional loss. And then as a result, we create a personality that kind of covers up our essential self, our true nature. And that personality helps us survive in the world. And for most of our lives, it's a gift. Yeah. And then often around midlife, people typically have the invitation or the opportunity to realize that actually this mask or this personality or this armor is another way of saying it, maybe isn't my true self. And so they begin to look within and kind of get reconnected with their true self. Mm-hmm. So all that to say, once you know your type, is only the beginning, because it's really about the journey back to your true self. So the type 8, they would have had this fear of being harmed or controlled as a child. And so they've developed this worldview where they feel like they need to look out for themselves. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, that's why they're so confident and grounded and determined, and they're such a force. But at their worst, they can be arrogant or self-centered or avoid weakness, intimidating, demanding. And really, they just need to know that they're safe. That's really their journey, is like understanding that they're safe is how they grow. And often that softness that is really the beautiful part of them is awakened when they're around animals or young children. So that's just a really brief overview of the 8. There's so many more ways that we could go with that. But back to the empathy part, like understanding why a person would, present as an 8 and have that personality, understanding like, oh, as a young child, you had this fear of maybe being controlled or harmed. It gives you some empathy as to why they behave like that. And I mean,
not just judging them for being gruff.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing about the 8s is that they have such a passion for justice and such a heart for the underdog. A really beautiful example of an Enneagram 8 is Mother Teresa. So people often thought she was a 2 when she's actually an 8. So yeah.
Yep. Very good. Next, I'm
going to
we go to 9.
We go to 9.
Yep.
So 9 is known as the Peacemaker. And this is a person that, when they walk in the room, so in the same way the 8 walks in the room and they think like, okay, what do I need to like take control of in this situation? Mm-hmm. And 9 would walk in the room and think like, where is there conflict? Where can I build a bridge? Where can I bring some reconciliation about? Like, how can I help mediate something? They are people that are easygoing. They are bridge builders. These are people that are just like so agreeable and lovely to be around. They are non-judgmental. They're patient. They are able to understand every perspective. Richard Rohr would say these are also people that have a need to avoid. And that comes from, whatever their story was as a young child. Again, usually unintentional, but they have this like a loss of connection. So they have like a fear of not belonging, a fear of not connecting to what's going on. And so they kind of go through life thinking like, is there a place for me? And again, that's where the empathy piece really comes in. So that's a 9. At their worst, though, they avoid conflicts. They're passive aggressive. At their worst, they can kind of merge with others, not express their desires or their needs. And
there's almost a dishonesty there because you never know what they're really feeling.
Totally.
At the risk of maybe offending someone
or
creating division where they're trying to build a
Sometimes
bridge.
you have to really like pull it out of them.
Yeah.
And so if you have, an Enneagram 9 on your team, like the best thing that you can say to them is like, just like you want to say to an Enneagram 8, like you are safe. Yeah. You want to say to an Enneagram 9, like you belong. There is a place for you. Yeah. You count. You matter.
It's amazing just in the first 2, the contrast between the 2 that are
in the body triad.
They're like right beside each other.
Totally.
And then we get into the third one. We'll segue into a 1. And again, it's
totally
night
different.
And day from a 9.
Yeah. So. And yet all 3 in that triad do have this need or desire for control and power. They just go about it differently.
Yeah.
So,
okay, next.
Okay. I'm sticking to my notes because I don't want to get anything wrong. I can't even keep up. Okay. Type 1. So this is where I live.
Yeah.
So this is known, often teachers call this the perfectionist. Personally, I like idealist better.
Okay.
That's just me. Richard Rohr, he would say this is the person who needs to be perfect. Okay.
That's why they call it.
That's why they call it the perfectionist. Exactly.
The idealist.
The fact that I don't like it being called the perfectionist says something about my own journey. But this is the type that, their loss would have been, or their wound is this like fear of being bad. And so they try to compensate in life, and they create this mask, this armor to be good. That's kind of what becomes their identity, wanting to be perfect, which of course you never can be. And the journey. But this is a person who, would walk in a room and think like, what can I fix here? Like, what's wrong? What can I fix? Sometimes for me, that's like walking in a room and like straightening a picture on the wall.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of thing. And this is a person who's super intentional, idealistic, purposeful, literally ones just want to make the world a better place. Of course, ones also have their shadow side. And so the flip side of that is ones can be rigid. They can be perfectionistic. They can, think of things in terms of black and white. And, ones also have every number has an inner critic, but ones have like the strongest inner critic. Like it's a loud, chronic inner critic. And so I always like to say, if you have a 1 on your team, or if you know a 1, like, just know they might come across as critical toward you. They are way more critical of themselves.
I was going to say they have an inner critic that also translates into an outer critic that most people can't handle, but you have no idea.
You have no idea
how much they've muzzled their inner critic.
Exactly. And so, I've said to my husband for sure, like, if you think I'm critical, I'm way more critical of myself.
Yeah.
So even that is helpful to understand. And so, one of the gifts that you can give a 1 on your team is to let them know, like, you're not perfect, but you are so good. You are so good. And they just need to hear that message that, in a sense, has been lost. That's a 1.
So that's the first triad, the
that's
body
the first triad. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Now we shift gears into 2, 3, and 4, the
heart triad. That's right. So again, these are types that are motivated by emotions, right? And that's how they process life and how they make decisions and so on. So type 2 is called the helper or the giver sometimes. And Richard Rohr would say this is a person who has a need to be needed. And so again, that kind of comes back to their own wound, where they would have like a fear of being unwanted or a fear of being unloved. And it's so ironic, really, because type 2 is really the most lovable type of all. Like, if you know a 2, like, you can't not love a 2.
No one dislikes a 2.
They are the most lovable type of all. I mean, 2s are the type that walk into a room and instantly think like, who here just needs my love? Who here needs a hug? Who here needs a meal? Who here needs someone to listen to? Like, they walk in a room and they actually can perceive needs that nobody else can perceive. They know the person that's suffering in the room. They can pick up on the emotions of the room. 2s are the people that, if there's a crisis, they're the first one to show up with a meal, with flowers, with whatever the need is. They're really, really intuitive that way. So that's I have in my notes, like, they're open-hearted, gracious, generous. They're so giving, so encouraging. At their worst, though, the thing about 2s is they suppress their own needs. I always like to say that if a 2 in your life has the courage to say to you, like, I need this, like, you want to take them super seriously, because they've probably sat on that for months. It's really hard for a 2 to ask for what they need. So by the time they're asking you, like, you want to pick up on, they really need that. So sometimes they get distracted by the needs of others and can neglect their own needs. Sometimes they can be martyr-like and give in order to receive, and it can feel manipulative or
almost,
exactly. So that's the piece about the 2 that is, in a sense, their shadow. But really, if you have a 2 in your life or a 2 on your team, you just want to let them know you are loved, you are loved, you are loved. Not for what you do, just because.
Just because. And again, stark contrast between the 1 and stark contrast between the 3.
Yeah.
Right? We get into the 3, they're very different.
3. Okay, so 3 is the achiever. 3s are super success-oriented, really, really driven people. Richard Rohr would use the language, they have the need to succeed. And that is because their own wound, their own loss is this, fear or this not feeling like they, like a worthlessness that they have to compensate for. And so
not enough.
Exactly. And so they are super driven, success-oriented, image conscious. They always want to move things ahead, be successful, and kind of have this sense in which they need to prove themselves. Now, 3s can get a bad rap, as can every number. The thing about 3s that's absolutely amazing is 3s are your multitaskers. 3s are the people that make success look so easy. They can do things in their sleep.
To-do lists for breakfast.
Oh my gosh, yeah. 3s are just so, driven, ambitious. They're multipliers. And they're also able to really sniff out people that are untrustworthy. So the authenticity is a really big value for a 3. And when they're healthy, they are super, super authentic. So that's a 3. If you have a 3 on your team, the challenges of the 3 is that they can be image conscious, avoid failure. They can often think at their worst that their image is their true value when it's not. And so really what 3s need to know is that they are valuable. If you have a 3 in your life, a 3 on your team, that their value, in our case, is like knowing that you are a beloved child of God, period. Not because of what you do.
Yeah, the 3's challenge is, if I achieve my to-do list in the woods, did it make a sound that anyone noticed?
Right.
The achievement is kind of to get noticed, and it can drift into a little bit more limelight, attention seeking, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
exactly. And so, again, the 3s in our lives just need to know that, you're valuable, period, just because you exist. Yeah. Okay. Keep
4,
moving. 4s.
Yeah.
A 4, this is the Individualist. And Richard Rohr, I really like his language. He doesn't actually use names for the types. He defines them as what their motivation is or what their need to be against. And so a 4, or in this case, a 4 has a need to be unique. So these are people that are deep, expressive, creative. At their best, they are non-dual thinkers. They're drawn to beauty. These are people that really live in the deep end. So you can't have a shallow conversation with a 4. These are people that go deep right away. And these are people that are very, very trusting, that people can confide in. They're very safe. And their wound or their loss is, they have a fear of not being significant, which is why their worldview or the way that they go through life is they're on this search to feel unique, to feel special. And so even 4s, if you know a 4 in your life, this will often come across even in how they dress or the things they care about. If something's trendy, 4s usually want nothing to do with it because of this drive towards uniqueness. At their worst, and I mean, when I talk about them being at their worst, it's so hard to say because every number has their worst. I always feel like I'm being so hard on this number. Yeah. Every number has the propensity to be at their worst. Doesn't mean you are that way, but you could be. But at their worst, 4s can be dramatic, prone to melancholy, self-absorbed. Sometimes they overshare their pain or their angst. They can be easily hurt, withdrawn. They struggle with envy, 4s. But it's not in things, it's more in relationships or in experiences. And so again, if you have a 4 in your life, in your family, if you have a 4 on your team, you just want to let them know you are special, you are unique. That matters to them. And that's really almost like the lost childhood message that they need to hear. Yeah.
It's interesting that the message for everyone in the Heart Triad is very similar. You are loved, you matter just for you, you're special.
That's right.
You're a child, a cherished child of God. So I'm sure there's some faith commonality there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get into, hopefully if we have time, I know I'm probably talking a lot about the types, but there are so many great resources out there, and Richard Rohr, who teaches the Enneagram from a Christian perspective, is a great resource.
Yeah.
I mean, his book is like that, but it's like so good.
Okay, last triad.
Yes, we're turning the
triad.
corner.
So talk about, first of all, 5.
Okay, so 5 is the investigator. And these are people that are, these are people that are brilliant, first of all. Like, these are on the people that are on like the cutting edge of like things that are happening and just like knowledge in general. They're really perceptive, really cerebral, really intense, often, not always, but often introverted. And they are driven by this need to understand. So that's what helps them survive in the world, is this need to understand and almost like become an expert in something. And so it can be like becoming an expert in coffee. It could be becoming an expert in you name it, how to make honey, gardening, whatever. Yeah. They actually, if you need to make a decision about like something to buy, like what kind of car do I buy? Talk to a 5, because they have researched it and become an expert in things. And that kind of goes back to their own loss or wound as a young child. Again, typically unintentional, but they would have this, fear of being helpless. And so part of how they compensate for that, how they've created this personality, is if they understand, then they feel equipped. So at their best, they have great knowledge, they're perceptive, they're calm. Oh yeah, they're able to like make connections between topics. It's actually really, really fascinating. These are like lifelong learners, curious people, always on the cutting edge of what's new. And as far as at their worst, they can withdraw, they can compartmentalize their life a little bit. They can almost be perceived as being secretive, and they can tend to withhold. And it's not, sometimes the language used is they can be stingy. It's usually like their energy that they withhold, because being in situations tends to drain them. So they're very careful what they give their energy to. And so that's kind of them at their worst. So that's a 5.
Okay.
So the message they need to know, though, is that you are not helpless. Like, you are so adequate for the situation at hand. So that's kind of the message that you want to speak over the 5s in your life or on your team.
Very good. 6?
6, okay. 6 is the loyalist. The loyalist, these are people that are committed. They're really all about security. They have a need to be certain or secure. And that's because, as a child, they would have felt like maybe they didn't have the guidance or support that they needed. And so that's kind of how they compensate for that. But these are people that are like the most loyal friend, the most loyal partner, the most loyal teammate. These are people that are super community oriented and have just a way of bringing people together in a real effortless kind of way. 6s often have an amazing sense of humor. What else do I want to say about 6s? Yeah, they can be, I'll get to the worst side, but they can be a bit, worst case scenario, the sky is falling. But they're always prepared when there's a crisis. In fact, if there's a crisis, 6 is like the exact person you wanna have. At their worst, they can be anxious, they can be paranoid, they can test you. What else do I want to say about them? They can procrastinate. But really, a 6, the journey for them, and what you want to say to them if you have a 6 in your life, is that you can trust yourself. You can trust yourself, you can trust yourself, you can trust yourself. And just for them to have that inner confidence. There's more I could say on a 6, but let's move on to 7.
Let's wrap it up. Last but
Again,
not
this
least.
is like a whole day workshop.
Yeah,
I'm pulling into an hour. 7, last but not least, this 7 is the enthusiast. Okay, so if the 6 is the person who walks in the room and thinks like, what do I need to do here to make this place feel safe? Then a 7 is the person who walks in the room and thinks, what do I need to do to liven this party up, to make people have fun? They're all about fun, about being spontaneous. They're really the life of the party. Sometimes they can be a bit scattered, but that's their shadow side. 7s are, Richard Rohr would describe them as, they have the need to avoid pain. And so that fear of that loss really comes from a fear of being deprived of something. Okay, so that's a 7. At their best, they're the life of the party, charming, curious, generous, spontaneous, love new opportunities. Even failure for them, like they can bounce back so fast and figure out how to reframe it and look at the positive side of that. But at their worst, they can be a bit scattered. They can be defensive. They can get distracted. They can overdo things. So gluttony is the word that's often used for a 7. It's not really about necessarily eating or drinking, but it's about just anything they can do it in excess.
In excess, yeah.
Because it's all about avoiding pain, right? That's their journey. And so if you have a 7 in your life, like just to let them know, like you have all you need, like you are good, like you are again, it kind of goes back to that, you are enough. Because when 7s are healthy, they actually live with a great deal of sobriety and restraint and can really like rein things in and be really focused and productive, which is cool. So that's the 7 types.
Okay.
Whew,
that's
how do
the
you
9
drink?
types.
That's the 9 types. That's type 7.
Yeah,
right.
The 9 type. That's the mind triad. And as we all kind of take a breath and digest the 9 types and the 3 triads and which, sort of type, wing, whatever. If someone now, want to kind of shift gears to apply this, to now bring this to life.
That's good.
I guess first off, how does someone discover or determine their number? Where do you go? What do you do?
Great question. So I would say the first place that I typically refer people is to either the Enneagram Institute website or kind of the sister website of that is the Canadian Institute of Enneagram Studies, which is where I did my training. Both of those are great. On the Enneagram Institute site, you can actually do an assessment there. I think it's $12 US.
Well, there's a short free.
There is a free one,
and then there's a more comprehensive.
That's right. I think it's called the Ready test, RHETI. So those are great places to start. I will say though, even the paid test, even the $12 test, is only 40% accurate. So. The Enneagram is different, again, than some of these other assessments because it's not really a science, okay? And so what it will do is it will help narrow down maybe your top 2 or 3 types. And so then from there, you can begin the discerning process of figuring out your type.
Well, I know when I did the Ready, RHETI, when I did that assessment, the assessment came back and among the questions, whatever, I had 3 tied for first.
Yeah.
So if I
if
you go online and what do you do if it's indeterminate?
Right.
So I've paid or I've gotten the resource. I'm trying to discover my type, but I'm at a standstill,
right? Because
now I've got options. What's sort of level 2 or how do you really flesh this out?
Sure.
To the place where you
Yeah. Okay. So in your case, so you're tied. You have 3 that are all tied. Then what I would suggest is then you actually take it back a step and go back to the triad, and then be like, okay, am I mostly motivated? Am I motivated by a need for power and control, affection and approval, or survival and security? Which one of those tracks with you? And then
yes. Again,
yes.
Doesn't no filter.
Right. Which one is the dominant, right? Because we do, we have all 3 triads within us, but one is going to be dominant. And then to be able to even sit with that triad and be what actually, how do I make decisions through my emotions, through my thinking, or is it a gut feeling? That will help you, because often if you're between, again, 2 or 3, if you can figure out your triad, then you can go from there. Beyond that, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sit with some of those descriptions, and they're actually both on the Enneagram Institute page or the Canadian Institute of Enneagram Studies. You could sit with those descriptions. And what you're going to do is you're going to just read them. And over time, it will take time, will mirror back to you who you are. And again, usually it's the one that you're the most uncomfortable with. Usually it's the one that makes you, in my case, I wanted to throw up, right? And maybe that's because I'm in the body triad. Maybe if you're in the heart triad, you feel all these emotions. For me, it was physical. I was ugh. And part of your journey is coming to peace and actually accepting and loving yourself and which comes back to the empathy piece. So that's what I would say. Another cool, not trick, but tool on the Enneagram Institute page, you can sign up for something called the Ennea Thought of the Day.
Right.
And you can sign up for up to 2.
Yeah.
So if you're between 2 numbers, I would suggest signing up for both, and you'll get them in your inbox. And it's just a little thought of the day. It's usually like a challenge or an invitation, sometimes an encouragement. But I know that my husband, when he was between 2, he signed up for both. And over time, one really, really tracks and one doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
So that will help confirm.
Yeah, like there is a longevity to
Yes.
this process that over time, it kind of reveals itself. It kind
That's
of
right.
proves itself. You kind of track with it.
Yep.
Is the final question I'd have just on kind of nailing down the number would be the role of other people. Because I know that one of your kind of Enneagram facilitator ground rules is you're not allowed to label other people. Oh, you're
No, that's right.
choose other words, but
Yes.
you're not allowed to. And so what actually ought the role of other people to be if you're doing this in some community, family, friendship, team type of environment?
Well, I have to say that is hard because the Enneagram is really about motivation, not behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't always tell. And once you find out your type, all you're going to want to do is type the people around you. Like, it's all you're going to want to do because you're just so fascinated and you're like, if only I could understand this person in my life. But the problem with that is that's actually pretty dangerous to try to tell people, oh, you must be this or you must be that. Because then you're almost weaponizing this tool that's meant to be a tool of growth and self-love and discovery. So bringing other people in is important, and you could like process it with other people, but it really is kind of, at least the discerning part is quite an individual journey because it is so inner and it is so reflective. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, that it's a slow journey. Like it's pretty common for people to take 6 months, 9 months to discover their type. Or like in my case, I was pretty sure I discovered it and then I was just like, close the book. I'm like, put that away. Yeah. I'll revisit it when I'm ready.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's sort of the gear that I want to shift into now, because just discovering your type is its own kind of extended reflection, introspective journey. And yet once you kind of land on a number, on a type, wing, whatever, you understand all this, your triad and everything. Now that's just the beginning.
Right.
Because the point of this isn't the awareness. The point of this is the growth beyond. So talk about what you do once you've landed on a number. Like, how do you grow from that? And how do you, I know one of the resources you wanted to refer to is this language of the road back to you, to actually discover your true self. Because the number isn't who you are. It's how you cope and mask essentially in the world. So just give us a bit of a picture for what the growth journey looks like, especially from a Jesus-centered spiritual perspective.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment, a great question. I mean, the thing is, oh gosh, where could I go with this? The thing is about once you know your type, it's easy, or what the danger can be is to then say like, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I was such a jerk. I'm just a 1. That's just who I am. And that's not actually the point. The point is...
Random example.
I'm a 1, so
totally
I can say
hypothetical,
that.
fictitious example. Good. Yeah.
Right, like that's actually not the point, to use your type as an excuse for bad behavior. Or like I mentioned, to say to other people, oh, you're being such a 4 right now. Like that's actually not the point. So the first part of your journey is discovering your type, which, as we mentioned, is a bit of a process and can take time and can take a lot of courage, right, to land on your type. I would say the next part of your journey is actually embracing your type and growing in empathy for yourself, love for yourself, understanding like that was a mask or armor or a personality that I created. Why did I do that? And then kind of like looking back at your life and going, oh, I totally get why I did that. And I have so much love and compassion for myself. So that's a huge value of the Enneagram. And then from there, it's about realizing like, okay, when I start to spiral into my unhealthy self, right? actually the Enneagram Institute website, on that page, it's fascinating because each type, it will actually give you levels. There's 9 levels of each type. So you can see, like, here's what I'm at when I'm healthy.
The most healthy version and the most toxic version of yourself. Yeah.
And you can almost see, like, oh, here's how I get there. And over time, you actually, through awareness, through prayer, through reflection, you begin to actually catch yourself. So I can catch myself way more now than I used to when I'm falling into maybe being judgmental, where I'm falling into being like perfectionistic, rigid, and I can be like, and when you catch yourself, the other key about the Enneagram is you don't beat yourself up. You're like, oh, there it is. Okay, I'm gonna actually return. Again, we didn't have time to get into it, but each type also has arrows, just to throw more language in. Each type has a direction they go when they're healthy and when they're stressed. And so again, I'll just use myself as an example. As a type 1, when I'm healthy, I go to the positive part of 7, which is like that fun, spontaneous place. And when I'm in stress, I go to the unhealthy places, the parts of 4. So I begin to feel sorry for myself and I begin to think like, oh, I'm the only person that cares about this. So I can catch myself when I'm spiraling. So again, that's part of the awareness. And then the other part is just realizing that, like, just the awareness of knowing this personality served me super well for most of my life, or from up to this point. And now my journey is actually about connecting with, returning to who God made me, like who I am at my core, like that valuable, just beloved child of God, and figuring out, like, what is the gift that I'm meant to bring to the world, and reconnecting with that part of myself. So again, like, Richard Rohr is someone I love as an Enneagram teacher, and I heard him on a podcast not too long ago, and he's a 1 as well. And he said, you know, I think he's in his 80s now, and he said, there's hardly any of my 1 armor left, because I've just been shedding it over the years. And I'm just like so far from that person I once was. And I've returned, or I'm returning to my essence, which is just really, really beautiful. Yeah.
You talked about the empathy that you have, both for yourself and for other people.
Others.
Talk a little bit, because I'm sure some people are wondering, in team environments, like, what's the difference between empathy for and accountability of?
Yeah.
You talk about using, you know, on the one hand, using numbers as weaponizing, but also using them as excuses. So what's the dance there as we're learning in a team environment to become familiar with our own numbers and our own journeys and other people's numbers and their journeys, and trying to empathize and encourage versus actually say that's not okay?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first thing I would say, you want to have a team where there is the safety and trust to have those conversations, but that's totally appropriate, especially especially because we all want to hold each other to a high standard. We all want to bring out the best in each other. And if it can be done in a way that it's mutual, there's tons of space for that. Or just to say, you know, you seem like you're in an unhealthy place right now. What's going on? How can I pray for you? Because when you understand the Enneagram, and when you know the people, whether it's on your team or in your family, you can begin to see when they're spiraling into unhealthy places. And all of us want to help each other be our best selves, right? Not just for our own sake, but for the kingdom.
What do you do with the team member who just flat out doesn't track with another number or another style of personality, because of their number? They just,
you know what I thought you were going to say? I thought you were going to say, what do you do with the teammate who doesn't want anything to do with the Enneagram?
Well, that you can answer that question too if you want.
I was going to say you just decide no.
Yeah.
You just type them and don't tell them.
Just exclude them from your fun. Yeah.
So your question was, what do you do with a team member?
A type that just fundamentally feels like they don't track with another type. I just can't work with you. I don't.
And when I was in I'll say Enneagram school, Enneagram training, they said, like, you will have a number that you actually are going to be like iron sharpening iron with that number. Yeah. Like, there's going to be someone that you're just going to be like, I don't get you. You bug me.
Yeah, I feel that. Like, there are some that you have almost more of like not a disdain, that's probably more harsh, but just an aversion
Totally.
a strong aversion to, like, I don't do that,
I would say Enneagram wisdom would say that's really about, when that happens, that's our invitation to do our own inner work. Yeah. Like, to be like, this person is my teacher right now, and what do they have to teach me? Yeah. That's very, very normal.
Yeah. Well, and I'm wondering, as I think about it, when you talked about the arrows, where you from your number would drift in your kind of healthiest version versus your unhealthy. Sometimes it's those people who you most want to be around, right, or have the greatest aversion to, because they're actually, that's another window into where your number might land, is from an arrow perspective. Who are the kind of people that I really wish I was more of, and the kind of people I don't want to have any part of, or don't want to be any part of, right? So another sort of awareness framework. We're here as a Leaders Village, trying to strengthen leaders to, provide a greater degree of leadership and foster a greater degree of Christ followership in our communities, in our local churches and ministries. And so what would you say as a team lead? Yeah. What does a leader need to keep in mind of in order to leverage the Enneagram effectively, not just in their lives, but as a leader in their team?
Yeah, I think, I will say, like, it's a fantastic tool for teams because you go deep fast, and you need to be willing to share parts of yourself that can be difficult. So I would say, as a team lead, you want to be, if you're going to introduce the Enneagram to your team, you want to make sure that there is trust and safety within your team. That's super, super important, because you'll only go as far. Otherwise you only go so far. Yeah. And then you want to make sure that, like we've talked about, you're not weaponizing the Enneagram. You're not labeling people. You're giving people the space and the permission to figure out their type, and maybe even change their mind 2 years down the road. That happens too, because people will often ask me, do you change your type over time? You don't, but you might change your awareness. Maybe you weren't ready to embrace your type 5 years ago, but now you're ready. And so that can happen. But as far as leveraging it as a team, I think it's really about empathy. It's really about understanding each other. It's really about growing to love and understand each other. And then it's about calling each other to be your best self, and essentially pointing each other toward Jesus, believing that we want our best selves, our true selves, our essential selves to be unlocked and to be free, so that the church, the kingdom, can get more of who God made us to be. Remembering that these types, they're not our true self, right? This is really about the mask we created, the armor we created because of whatever reason. And the more that we can shed that, then the freer we can become, and really free the people around us. Yeah.
For me, I think the power as a team that I've discovered is both what you're talking about, where you go deep fast. Like, it is a really bonding experience to have, a retreat session or a offsite or an afternoon where you dig into this stuff and you really connect well over this. And I mean, it helps you work better. You understand each other better. You can call each other on stuff. You can see each other when you're spiraling, and you know each other better. You become a better team. But the way deeper value for me is that it actually takes leaders who, in language we use a lot in our office, in ministry and local church work, are so often busy maintaining the program and managing the problems, maintaining the program, that we miss the point that this is all about making spiritual progress towards Jesus. Right. And as a team, what it does is it actually centers you on your belovedness, on your child of Godness, on your spiritual siblingness, and on your followership together, out of which comes your leadership. And so if you're wondering, in a Leaders Village webinar, why we would devote a month to unpacking the Enneagram and encouraging leaders and teams to dive into this, it's so that we can lead in kingdom settings out of hearts personally and out of teams galvanized around Jesus-centeredness as followers, from which his leadership can flow out of us into our ministry environments. I found that that's been the most helpful piece of this because it brings you back to center in the whole point of all of this, where so often in ministry and local church work, you can get on the hamster wheel of missing the point and drift away from the true heart of what God has for you. So I guess wrapping up, can you just give us some direction on resources or next steps, or where people can go?
Sure. The Enneagram Institute website is a great resource. The Canadian Institute of Enneagram Studies is a great resource. There's an Enneagram book by Richard Rohr that's fantastic. I brought a couple. I know Ian Cron and Suzanne Stabile wrote this book called The Road Back to You, which is fantastic. I didn't bring it with me. It wasn't in my office here, but Chris Hewitts has a book called The Sacred Enneagram. And it's also a book from a Christian perspective. And what's great about it is it gives you spiritual practices that are helpful and healthy for each type as we become more of our true selves.
Yeah, it links the contemplative spirituality to the Enneagram journey.
Yeah, this is a great book called The Enneagram Made Easy by Renee Barron and Elizabeth Waggle. Also, I need to do a shout out to Sleeping at Last, which is just a super talented, beautiful band. That's Ryan O'Neill that is the lead singer. He has written a bunch of songs, and he has an album. You can get it on iTunes or Spotify called Atlas, and he's written a song for each Enneagram type.
Wow.
And actually those songs are great resources if you're trying to discern your types. You could listen to those. So anyways, that's a great resource. I would say, and be patient with yourself. Like you mentioned, it's a slow journey. It's an inner journey, it's a reflective journey, it's a courageous journey, and also have fun with it. You do need to have, in the same way you need to have courage to dive into the Enneagram, you also need a bit of a sense of humor to be able to laugh at yourself and almost joke with people around you about it. And
there's a grace you've got to
There's a grace, absolutely. And don't force it on people. Do not force it on people.
I'm not forcing it on you.
And don't force it on people. And if people are curious, then amazing.
Fantastic. Carrie, thanks so much for being here. In the spirit of full-time church leaders with sort of side hobbies or side journeys, next month we're going to sit down with homeless shelter pastor Greg Paul from Sanctuary Church in Toronto, who in the last number of years has been on a journey, kind of reevaluating his own understanding and even theology around LGBTQ plus inclusion. And he recently released a book called Queer Prophets that has helped him and can help many others discover the beauty and the image bearing of Jesus that we as a church so desperately need from the LGBTQ plus community. So we're really thrilled to have him and hope that you'll join in with us in 1 month's time as we continue finding our way together. Thanks, everyone. Take care.